Hello and welcome. Today I'll be talking about the power of ornament, or rather the power of ornament in contemporary architecture. But first, to tackle this question of what power does ornament have, we have to talk about what is ornament. And ornament is something that is usually thought of as related to classical architecture or Greek architecture, in the case that it's just carvings and sculptures on the exterior of a building that are solely decorative and not integral to the structure and meaning of the building. But that's not always true. This comparison is kind of further talked about by Kipnis in his article Cunning versus Cosmetics, where he draws up an analogy comparing ornament to kinds of makeup or cosmetics which camouflage and modify the appearance or a building, while in comparison to jewelry, which is just a performative additive feature. I think it's commonly thought of this binary between performative and discrete, in which the performative has a worse connotation, as it's seen as useless. It's not really anything but just flashiness. But it's undermined the capability of the performative or ornament to have a storytelling aspect in which it can tell a lot about a building and its intentions and its culture. I want to talk about this topic through three buildings. The first one being the Arab World Institute by Jean Nouvel. The second one being Daniel Libeskind's Jewish Museum, Berlin. And the third one being David Adjaye's Smithsonian National Museum of African American History. I'll start talking about the Arab World Institute by Jean Nouvel. This building is meant to be an intersection between the Arab and the Parisian culture in Paris, and it's meant to be an interaction space for these two cultures. The building was first met with pushback by a lot of Arab representatives because of its modernist look. A lot of them wanted it to be more pastiche, like the Paris Mosque, but they were kind of convinced by Nouvel's use of the mashrabiyya, which is a traditional lattice work from the Arab culture, which is useful for creating privacy and shade, and also has very strong cultural significance. But Nouvel, apart from just the ornamental cultural reference, he also wanted to incorporate a technological side to this, in which he incorporated ocular devices into each one of the patterns, which can control the light which enters each building, which is very relevant to the original purpose of the mashrabiyya, showing that you can have practical uses to ornament apart from just being a performative thing, as well as culture significance, which adds to the building, because the building ultimately is a cultural place. The next building I'll talk about is the Jewish Museum Berlin, which is an extension to the original Jewish Museum in Berlin, which was first constructed in 1933. It only lasted 5 years before it had to be closed down because of Nazi rule. It reopened in 1975, but didn't really gain much significance until the extension was built in 2001. This building has two main ornamental features, one being the external windows on the facade, and the other one being the three voids that cut through the building. The external window is constructed of a dismembered Star of David, in which Libeskind wanted to create stories throughout the building, and the windows are placed so if you look out from the building at the certain places where the window slashes through, you can see a specific view of the city, which kind of creates a story of continuity. The other ornamental feature is the voids that cut through the building. And while these might not seem like an ornamental feature, they kind of follow Kipnis' description of an additive feature or subtracted from the building, which is there to create some sort of cultural significance. And these voids do have cultural significance. It's very important. They embody absence, as said by Libeskind, and they're there as a form of remembering those lost in the Holocaust. The third building I'll be talking about is the Smithsonian National Museum of African History. This building was constructed in 2016, and it's located in the National Mall in Washington. The building is kind of important in the National Mall, especially its location, as it's right in the middle of it, and it's the one non-white building in a long mall of just traditional classical architecture, white marble. This building intentionally is made out of bronze to create that contrast, referencing the contrasting cultures. And the facade of this building is constructed of 3 trapezoids fit into each other to create this crown formation, which is referencing the crown of a traditional African sculpture, and it's called corona. And also the angle at which the trapezoid goes inwards, it resembles or imitates the top of the Washington Monument. The lattice work on the outside of this building is a reference to traditional iron work made by free slaves in New Orleans, and it's very connected to John Nouvel's Mashrabiyah, as it's trying to incorporate a pattern which draws a lot of cultural significance and speaks a lot about the building itself simply from the exterior facade. And if there's one thing these 3 buildings have in common, is that they have very strong ornamental facades, which kind of define a lot about the building. And it's I feel like the important part about these buildings is that they are very impactful, not only having to go inside and visiting the museum, but just from the message they impart externally, and from the ornament which they conceive. And also they represent that ornament can also be a practical use. And ultimately, I think this reflects that ornament is not just an additive performative feature. It can be very important to the integrity of a building.